Hi, I'm Antonia. This is Universally Me. First, please subscribe and share if you like my videos, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Antonia Carlotta. Please also support my work on Patreon. Most recently, my support from Patreon went to get me these lights, which you can actually see in the background of my video. I'm still kind of working that out a bit. But I've also used that to buy editing software and resources for research, and it really means a lot to have your support. So check it out, patreon.com/Antonia Carlotta. Often when we talk about Carl Laemmle and his family, we talk about Carl or Junior, maybe Eddie, William Wyler. The Laemmle family in general has been pretty overlooked, but Carl Laemmle had a daughter, and I feel like she gets kind of extra overlooked, even though she was really close to her father her whole life. Now, I will say right off the bat, part of this is probably because she never really got in the film industry, but women have a tendency to be a little extra overlooked anyway. So I really wanted to learn more about her, and I'm so glad that I did. So this video is about Carl Laemmle's daughter, Rosabelle Laemmle. I want to start by saying that when I was little, I didn't actually know a lot about my family history yet. I probably couldn't have named 5 of the family members that I talk about on a regular basis now. But when I was 9 years old, I got a puppy and I got to name it. And the name that I chose for the puppy was Rosabelle. And at the time, that was because I was in a play called Houdini, and there was a song called Rosabelle. This was at the Goodspeed Opera House in Connecticut. But I still think it's so cool that of every name on earth, of any name that I could have chosen, I unknowingly chose a family name for my first childhood pet. There's a second thing that I need to add in, because as I was researching, I started noticing a pattern, and that's that Rosabelle is kind of a mystery. There are a lot of things that I read about that maybe happened and maybe didn't. There are times when she's all over the newspapers and time when she disappears. There are a lot of things that are kind of up for debate. When she was born is up for debate. Her name is kind of up for debate. The way she died is up for debate. I actually heard a story about how she died, which I will share at the end, but I couldn't find even one thing confirming her death. So for all I know, she could still be alive somewhere out here. The things that I know as facts, I'm just gonna say as facts in this video, but if I'm not sure, if there are conflicting stories, I will let you know, and I appreciate your patience through all that. Rosabelle Laemmle was born December 3rd in Oshkosh, Wisconsin to Reka and Carl Laemmle. The plaque on her crypt says that she was born in 1903, but I'm almost positive she was actually born in 1901. Her father would have been managing the Continental clothing store. She would have been about 5 when he opened up his first theater, and 8 when her little brother Junior was born. By every account, Junior and Rosabelle were the absolute light of their father's life. And interestingly, in the earliest accounts of Rosabelle that I can find in newspapers, she's actually just called Rose Laemmle and not Rosabelle. So I don't know if that means that Rose was her real name and she transitioned into Rosabelle over time, or if Rose was just a nickname that they used. I also found a ridiculous number of references over the years to her as Rosabella, but I think that those are just wrong. Though not as notably as her brother, Rosabelle really grew up in the film industry as well. She would help out in the offices at 1600 Broadway in New York and traveled with her father often. She would screen films and give notes and read books and magazines looking for stories for Universal to make into movies. In some ways, it really sounds like Rosabelle had a dual role, because even as she was learning the ins and outs of the family business, she was also expected to learn how to manage the household duties. And this expectation would only increase after her mother died suddenly in 1919 during an influenza epidemic. As a teen, Rosabelle spent a lot of her time traveling between New York and California, taking care of both home and business matters. And she also spent a lot of time traveling to Germany with her father. I'm not going to pretend that I don't think that Junior was probably Carl's favorite, but there's no denying that Carl and Rosabelle were also very close. In 1921, Rosabelle briefly considered getting into acting. She had done some shows for charity and apparently had really great comedic timing. There were some articles that came out saying that she was only considering stage because, quote, she knew too much about the inner workings of studios. But there were other articles at the same time saying that she actually was considering film. There were a few reports that attached her to a Todd Browning film, but as far as I know, that never materialized, and I don't think she ever appeared in a single movie. I want to give a sense of Rosabelle's personality because as I was learning about her, I felt like I got a really interesting sense of who she was. And I could be wrong, but I also kind of don't think that I am. So here's what I got of Rosabelle. There's no doubt in my mind that she was a sharp girl. She was opinionated and she was headstrong. Carl always used to boast that if Rosabelle wanted to make something happen, she would make it happen. She grew up in the industry. She was a first-generation Hollywood socialite. I think that Rosabelle wanted to do a lot. I think she had big ideas for her life. But as I mentioned before, after her mom died and as she got older, she was kind of just expected to take over managing the household. And if you ask my family about that, it sounds like she kind of resented it. So she was kind of difficult and she was moody and hard to deal with and a little bit sad. She went to a lot of parties and she hosted a lot of parties and she was philanthropic and a society woman. She loved her dad, she loved her family. But if I had to guess, I think that Rosabelle might have felt a little bit stuck in her life. On the other side of that, I do appreciate knowing that she was allowed to be involved in business from time to time. It does seem like, to an extent, Carl treated her like a smart and capable human being. And I know it's sort of the least to ask for, but this was the 1910s to the 1930s. So bringing her to business meetings, allowing her to help with decisions, it really feels like something. In the late 1920s, Rosabelle would start dating Irving Thalberg, who was her father's right-hand man at Universal. And as a side note, Irving Thalberg was a huge part of Universal history, and I will have a video up about him within my next 3 videos. A lot of you have asked me for that, and I am trying to put together the very best video that I can. Irving started as a secretary in New York and was later the studio manager overseeing Universal Productions. He was really young and really impressive. According to the biography Irving Thalberg, Boy Wonder to producer Prince, Rosabelle was actually pretty unimpressed when she first met him, being only secretary and all. But over time he grew on her and then they started dating. Irving Thalberg was born with a heart condition, and it sounds like his mom was always very worried and very overbearing when it came to him. She was not happy with his relationship with Rosabelle, and I think worked pretty tirelessly to keep them apart, and ultimately it worked. At some point, I actually think I'll also make another video specifically about Irving and Rosabelle's relationship because there was a lot more here than I thought there would be, and it was actually pretty entertaining. In January of 1929, Rosabelle married Stanley Bergerman, who was an executive of the department store The May Company. The wedding took place in a small ceremony in Carl Laemmle's backyard in Benedict Canyon and was followed by a huge party with hundreds of friends and family in attendance. After the wedding, Rosabelle and Stanley actually moved in with Carl, and Rosabelle took care of her father while Stanley started producing films at Universal. In 1930, Rosabelle had a daughter named Carol, and in 1932, a son, Stanley Jr. It's hard to find much about Rosabelle during this time, but I imagine she just kind of fell into the role of wife and mother and society woman. She still went to events and hosted parties. She was involved in a bunch of different charitable organizations, including one, a children's home called Vista Del Mar, where I actually had some relatives live for a time. Rosabelle died in November of 1965, and here's the thing. All I have to go off of about how she died is family gossip. I cannot find one obituary. I don't know how to get a death certificate for her. I cannot find anything that speaks to her death other than my family who's gossiping. And I feel a little strange sharing this because it's not a good story. It's not a happy story. And I don't know if it's true, and I don't know if anyone in my family would be mad at me for sharing it, but you know, this whole video is about exploring who Rosabelle was and learning that, and this might be a part of it. I don't know. I might regret this, but I really want to be open with you guys and share whatever it is that I learned, whether or not it paints my family in like the greatest of lights. So Here's what I heard. So Rosabelle and Carol were at a party, and Rosabelle wanted to leave and wanted Carol to drive her home. And Carol wasn't ready to leave. So Rosabelle kind of got mad and left in a huff and drove herself home. And I guess on the way got into some sort of car accident that was particularly bad for the other person involved. And in the ensuing weeks or months, I don't even actually know, Rosabelle was so racked with guilt that at some point she overdosed on some combination of pills and alcohol. I feel like that was a really dark note to end on, but I don't know. I really didn't know anything about Rosabelle coming into this video, but now that I've explored her a little bit more, she really is one of the more nuanced and interesting relatives that I've gotten to learn about. So even though all of her story isn't necessarily happy or uplifting or even complete, I'm still so happy that I did learn about her. She's now one of the relatives that, I really wish that I could talk to and ask questions. I would love to hear her stories. I would love to know what she would have wanted in her life or what she hoped for herself. If you guys know any of the answers to any of the sort of question marks or mysteries that I brought up during the video, let me know in the comments below, and I promise to make my next video a lot happier for you guys. Please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Antonia Carlotta, and don't forget to subscribe and share. Thanks so much. Bye.